Welcome to a new vlog and video of the cruise pipes, and today we're going to take a look at day 5 and day 6 on board of AIDAnova, and we are in Cherbourg in France and in Southampton in the UK, and here on the map you can see our route today. We are starting with a nice breakfast here in Cherbourg in France, and after that it was time to leave the ship and head out into the city center. Here we can see a beautiful terminal building that has also been used for the ocean liners. Also, Cherbourg was one of the ports of the Titanic. It was the second to last port of the Titanic. After leaving Cherbourg, she went to Ireland, and after that, tragical sinking of the Titanic took place. The docking location here of the AIDAnova in Cherbourg is quite central. It takes about 15, maximum 20 minutes to walk into the city center. You could also take a shuttle bus, but in my opinion that's not necessary. Cherbourg itself is a small but beautiful city with a nice old town, typical French atmosphere, small cafes, few restaurants, few shops, few supermarkets, as you can see here. So it is a beautiful city and I really enjoyed being here. For me it was the first time in Cherbourg. AIDAnova is either calling Le Havre or Cherbourg, and I think Cherbourg is a quite good option because Le Havre itself is not that beautiful. There are beautiful cities around, but Le Havre itself is not that beautiful. But Cherbourg itself is very beautiful. But also from here you can have some nice excursions. I was thinking about doing the excursion to Mont Saint-Michel, but I decided to do that later, different time, and to discover Cherbourg because I've never been to this city. One of my highlights was this beautiful sailing ship in the harbor, and right next to the harbor is also a big shopping center, but it was not that beautiful. I would recommend staying in the city center. It has a nicer atmosphere than this shopping center. So I walked straight back into the city center, looked at a few more buildings I haven't seen yet here in the city center, and then I decided to do the most French thing you can do, of course, sitting in a cafe outside on the streets, drinking a coffee and enjoying a croissant. If you're worried about the language barrier, I would recommend learning a few phrases in French. The most useful phrases: I am sorry, I don't speak French, do you speak English? If you can say this, in my experience, everybody is very helpful and kind. I know there is this typical cliché of French people being stubborn about speaking only French, but for me this has never been actually true. I think it's more about respect. I think French people in general just don't like it if you speak to them in a different language and expect them to understand it, but if you ask them nicely and politely. So far everybody spoke at least English, sometimes for me even German. So they usually do speak a few languages. They just don't like to be treated rudely, which is, in my opinion, quite understandably. If you are somewhere and somebody starts speaking to you in a foreign language and expects you to understand that language, you would be probably also a bit wondering what is going on, and maybe you're not that kind to that person. But if this person would ask you in English if you speak a certain language and you do speak that language, you would be probably much more polite. So don't worry about the language barrier, just try to be as polite as possible. If you don't speak French, at least ask them in English if it's okay to speak English. Just be a bit polite and then it will be no problem. So don't worry, you can for sure take an excursion on your own in France. You do not have to have a booked excursion just because of language and some clichés about the language here in France. Another quite interesting part of Cherbourg is the La Cité de la Mer Museum, a maritime museum. It is now the largest submarine open to the public and the only nearly complete ballistic missile submarine hull open to the public, so something very special, and I would have loved to see it from the inside, but unfortunately La Cité de la Mer was still closed for the winter season. But next time when I will be in Cherbourg, for sure I will visit this interesting museum, and this submarine was also quite an interesting view to see this huge submarine right next to our cruise ship. And then it was time to head back into the terminal, and that took quite a while. There were a few problems. because they always closed down the stairs as soon as it was getting too crowded upstairs, and so there was a quite long queue outside, a couple of hundred people waiting outside of the terminal to go through security. Took about half an hour, but then I was back on board and went into the brewery, the Brauhaus, and there you can get a nice salad from a buffet and the rest is served at your table. I opted for a quarter of a chicken, and I also opted for alcoholic drinks again because I wanted to try the home-brewed beer here on board. And then I went up to the sun deck to watch the Stena Horizon going into port, coming from Rosslare in Ireland. Actually, it is quite a big ship, but compared to our AIDAnova, it is looking tiny. Though still interesting. I love to watch ferries and other ships going into a port or leaving, so I spent quite some time watching the Stena Horizon docking here in Cherbourg. Here we can also see the city in the background. As I said, Cherbourg is a quite beautiful city and for sure worth a visit. Of course, it also is an important ferry port due to its location almost like on a peninsula. So there are a lot of ferries to the UK and to Ireland, operated by Stena Line and by Irish ferries, as well as Brittany ferries. With a hot drink, I was then watching another interesting ferry leaving the port of Cherbourg. It is the WB Yeetsz ferry of Irish Ferries built in Flensburg in Germany. Also quite an interesting ship with a quite high capacity, up to 1,875 passengers on board. This is one of the biggest ferries in the world and also can be considered a cruise ferry, and I hopefully will have the chance at one point to show this interesting ship to you in the future. Here she is leaving, turning around and then heading for Ireland. Then I went back to my cabin and took a little break, and after that it was time for us to leave the port of Cherbourg, and of course I went to the open decks for this again. This time I went to the lanai bar again at the aft of the ship. Here we can see the Stena Horizon docked behind us and us being prepared for the departure. Here you can see our engines are running, and then we are leaving Cherbourg and now we're heading for Southampton in the UK. The Stena Horizon was leaving a few minutes after us as well, heading to Rosslare in Ireland. Of course, we could now enjoy the Sail Away music of AIDA, which is Sail Away and Orinoco Flow. Fortunately, I cannot include it here in the video due to copyright laws, but if you don't know the melody, just check it out. There are some videos on YouTube and also you can find it on Spotify. For me, this is one of the best Sail Away musics, together with the Sail Away music of TUI Cruises. We're now heading out of the port, which takes a while as Cherbourg is a quite big port. We also have a pilot on board who's guiding us till we reach the open seas. We have another beautiful view of the port and the city of Cherbourg here in the darkness. So it was quite a beautiful sight, quite interesting. And here at the lanai bar you can also enjoy it with a nice drink in hand. Here we can see the pilot boat coming to pick up the pilot. Here you can see how much power our engines having. They're just pushing this boat away whilst it is going through our stern wave. And now the pilot boat is next to us and we are leaving the port, going past the lighthouse as you can see here, and just a few minutes later the pilot was picked up and now we're on our way to Southampton, which will be the next port. And I had an appointment at the Ristorante Casa Nova. I've reserved a table here as well. This is the third included restaurant where I need a reservation. For me personally, it was the weakest of those three restaurants, not because of the food but because of the service. The service was not perfect today. I got 5 courses in 45 minutes. At one point I even had 2 dishes at the same time, so something went wrong with the service here, but otherwise it was also a nice dinner. On the next morning I woke up with a nice breakfast and then it was already time to leave the ship. Of course, first I had to clear immigration, which was done on board. That worked very well. And then it was time to leave the ship and head out to Southampton. we were docked at the ocean terminal again, where I've been just a few weeks earlier with the Queen Anne. Of course, I again used the possibility to take a nice picture of the ship, and also the weather was as sunny as last time. So I was very lucky with the weather in the UK. Recently was there 2 days and both of them were extremely sunny and nice. Today my destination was the Isle of Wight and I was taking the Red Funnel ferry, and there will be a video about this upcoming. It will be the next video actually, so I will not show you too much of the ferry, and also I will not show you anything from the Isle of Wight because we will see that in detail in the next video, where I will also show you the ship and tell you a bit more about Red Funnel and the ferries, of course also about the catamaran. Here we can see our wonderful AIDAnova as we're sailing past her. Also a possibility to take some nice pictures of the ship here in Southampton. And here we are already back from the Isle of Wight, and now I'm heading back to the ocean terminal, heading back on board. And this was actually the last port of call. Next port will be Hamburg, so in the next video from onboard AIDAnova you will see a day at sea and the disembarkation in Hamburg. As my excursion to the Isle of Wight took a while, the restaurants were already closed for lunch, so I went into the street food corner and enjoyed currywurst and döner. In the evening I had a reservation at a Time Machine restaurant, a dinner show. The food was very nice, but please be aware, if you're an introvert person, I would not recommend going there because the chances to be included in the show are quite high, especially if you're a solo traveler like me. The chances are very high that you will be a part of the show and you have to play a little role. So for me that was a bit strange in the beginning, but actually I really enjoyed it and it was quite fun. But if you're not into that, I would not recommend going to Time Machine because a lot of guests were getting a small role and they have to slightly participate in the show. But it was a nice experience and I really enjoyed it. And on this day I felt like doing some sports in the evening, so shortly before midnight I went into the gym, which is very nice because here the gym is open 24/7. And that's already it for day 5 and 6. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to comment, like, subscribe or share the video link here. You can see when the next video will be uploaded and the name of the song. As always, I'd like to say thanks for watching and I hope to see you in my next video then.